Yeah, there you go. And we're just about at start time. I normally do a big old song and dance and everything else, but let me get my audio. You know, my computer shut down right before we started, and I had to get access again. So let me work on that. But hey, it's great to, if you can, okay, let me just say really quickly, it's great to have you on the show. We're going to do 2 of these today, guys. And thank you for joining. We're going to get this recorded. Michael's slide deck, I'm going to send to everybody who registered Friday morning. We'll put together a nice email for everybody who registered, so that way you can get it and you can pass it to your team, etc. We've been off for a couple of weeks, so had a little bit of a rest, which we knew we'd come back with the Wake Amp webinar, which we're excited about, Michael. And we've got a whole bunch of things planned out for us on the forthcoming Wednesdays. So look forward to that. I'm going to get my audio together, and I'll probably rejoin midstream, Michael. So we can do Q&A throughout, however you want to roll that. But welcome, my buddy. And I'm going to sign off and go try to figure my audio out. Okay, bud? We'll be back on with you. I'm going to turn it on over to you. Thank you.
All right. Good morning, everybody. I appreciate you joining. My name is Mike Buratto. I'm the Principal Product Manager for multi-room audio at Snap One. So Gary and I are old friends from sort of previous lives. So it's nice to be back in touch with Gary and working with him again. I want to talk to you guys today about the Episode Wake Amp. This is a product we launched about 4 months ago now, and it's a really interesting product. It's a great retrofit solution, but it really covers the gamut of any voice system or virtual assistant system, and improving that audio experience for that customer. So let's just dive into it. So start off with why choose the Wake Amp? And I'm assuming for those of you that are on the call now, you have sort of an idea of what the Wake Amp is, and you can see that it's a single gang wall plate with a few buttons on the front. We'll get into what those buttons do. But what the Wake Amp does, it's essentially an amplified keypad. So again, it's a 1 gang wall plate, but it's a 2-channel audio amplifier. And it connects to your customer's smart voice assistant, think Amazon Alexa, via Bluetooth, to bring that voice control convenience and that voice control technology into the home with a much better audio experience. So essentially, you connect the voice assistant device to the Wake Amp. The Wake Amp then transmits any audio from the voice assistant device, whether it's a response to your question, a response to your command, any music that you ask it to play. It will then play that through the Wake Amp. And of course, the Wake Amp will send those to the speakers, obviously in the ceiling or in the wall or wherever you have them in the home. Uses commercial grade Bluetooth. So this is actually a much larger range than we are used to with traditional Bluetooth. Now, this is a specific case. You need a device that will actually transmit commercial grade Bluetooth, and the range is actually up to 100 feet as opposed to traditional Bluetooth or consumer Bluetooth that has about a 30-foot range. This is really a future-proof mechanism. Not a lot of devices currently have commercial grade Bluetooth, but in the next couple of years, they likely will with the new Bluetooth chipsets. Again, really the basis of this is smart music, simple control. We want to make all of the convenience and all of the cool technology in virtual assistants. We want to make that usable in a much better audio experience for the customer. Now, when you're kind of selling this, there's a few things to keep in mind, and or a few selling points, I should say, that you should sort of bring to light. One is you can bring legacy installs back to life. And the whole point of the Wake Amp was that it's a 1-to-1 replacement for these sort of archaic in-wall analog volume control devices. And when I say 1-to-1 replacement, you use the same wiring that's already in the wall. So you're not actually doing any additional wiring. You're using the existing speakers, you're using the existing wiring. So you can bring sort of these legacy installs from the early 90s, early 2000s that are just sitting in the wall, not really being used. You can bring those back to life without spending thousands and thousands of dollars on amplifiers to reinvigorate those systems. So much more budget conscious solution to, again, reinvigorate those installs. It installs in a single gang wall box. It is low voltage, so it doesn't have to. But if you have an existing wall box in the wall, it will fit without a problem. Now, metal boxes can impact the wireless range performance, so we do not recommend using those. But obviously for most residential installs, the in-wall boxes are plastic, so that's not an issue. So I did mention sort of a one-to-one replacement. We mentioned these legacy audio systems where you have an amplifier plugged into a wall and an AV closet. Got 2 or 4 conductor wire going to a legacy volume control, and then from that volume control, you're wired up to the speakers. When I mentioned that this is a one-to-one replacement, you are taking that wake amp, again, using the same wiring, replacing that amplifier with the wake amp's included power supply plugged into the wall in that AV closet. Connect it to an Amazon Echo Dot or Echo Show as a source. You can also use a phone as a source if the client prefers to do that. Same wiring to the same speakers in the ceiling. Very easy to use. Now, again, I mentioned commercial grade Bluetooth. This is class 1 Bluetooth. Again, not a ton of sources are using commercial grade Bluetooth currently, but we do see that becoming more and more of a capability in the future. Now, to achieve this class 1 range, source device needs to be class 1 compatible. One of the other reasons we used commercial grade Bluetooth, and not to give away too many secrets, we are working on a firmware release currently to bring native multi-room connectivity to the wake amp. I'm going to talk about how you can have multi-room connectivity today, which is not native, but still very usable and still very user-friendly. So that's the reason for the commercial grade Bluetooth, the extended range. Now we say optimized for Alexa. There's nothing specific about the wake amp that is only usable with Alexa devices. Really what we should say is that Alexa is optimized to be used with the wake amp. And I say that because Google Home devices have a Bluetooth output, but some internal testing has shown that the Google devices are especially buggy when it comes to this Bluetooth output. So right now we do not recommend Google Home devices. And it's unfortunate because Google Home is a great system, but Alexa devices are pretty much bulletproof with the wake amp. So when we say optimized for Alexa, that's all we mean, is you won't have a lot of these bugs, a lot of the dropouts that you have with Google Home devices. Now, let's get into sort of what the customer sees from the product. You have a front panel that, again, just installs into the single gang wall box, but it has 3 buttons on the front and it has some status LEDs. Now, depending on how you set up the wake amp, when you configure it and install it, those buttons can do one of 2 things. They can control volume and mute, or they can control the music, meaning I can track forward, I can track back, I can play pause instead of just muting. Then you have these 5 status LEDs on the bottom. We'll talk about what those do. So if you want to pair this thing to any Bluetooth device, you guys know if I'm using a Bluetooth device, I need to put it in pairing mode, meaning I have a Bluetooth source and I want to connect it to my Bluetooth speaker. You can kind of consider this a Bluetooth speaker in this case. So you need to put the speaker into pairing mode. All you do is hold this mute button down for 5 seconds. The front LEDs will blink actually left to right. So in succession, they'll kind of wave from left to right. When that's happening, the wake amp will then be discoverable in your device settings. So say you have your iPhone or your Android device that you're trying to pair this to, or an Alexa device. That's how you get this thing to be recognizable by any Bluetooth device. Now, when you are setting this thing up, you guys kind of saw the image of the back. It has a a 6-terminal Phoenix connector on the back. Obviously, the 4 of those go to the speakers. The other 2 go to actually the low voltage power supply. I did mention earlier that this can be 2 conductor speaker wire, as long as it's, I think, 16 gauge or better, you're just fine. It doesn't matter how long the run is. I think we say, 16 gauge can do like 250 feet, 14 and 12 can do above that. But this actually plugs into a small little, essentially power supply dongle, which is essentially a barrel terminal that plugs into the power supply brick. Now that brick, the idea there is that it's plugged in the AV closet, just like the previous amplifier would be, or in the AV rack. Now, I mentioned this thing is optimized for Alexa. I do want to talk about exactly how to pair that to an Alexa device, because I think there's some confusion there whenever anybody talks about using Alexa with Bluetooth. So to pair an Alexa device, whether it's an Alexa Dot or an Alexa Show or an Echo Dot, you need to do that through the Alexa app. So you need to download the Alexa app to your device, whether it's there we go. Whether it's an iPhone or an Android device, there's an Alexa app for that. So download the app. You're going to hit this devices tab and go to Echo and Alexa. A list of configured Amazon Alexa devices will appear in your Echo and Alexa device list. Now, when I say configured, I mean you bought this Alexa device, you downloaded the Alexa app, and you configured it via Wi-Fi. So you can use this Alexa device just like you can any other Alexa device by saying, "Hey Alexa, play music on Spotify." That is a separate process from pairing it via Bluetooth. And I'm working under the assumption here that the Alexa Dot is already configured in the Alexa app. So you're good there. So what you're going to do is actually select the Echo Dot you want to pair this wake amp to. Now, we do recommend that the Echo Dot or Echo device, Alexa device, is in the same room as the wake amp. So you select that. You're going to have a menu that comes up about Bluetooth connections. There's obviously some other things here, but just hit that connected device button in the middle. It will open up a pairing list, essentially what you'll see under step 5. But in order to get the wake amp to be discoverable, you need to hold down that mute, play, pause button for 5 seconds. It will pop up as wake amp 1. You select wake amp 1, and then it will show up in Bluetooth connections. You're done. That's pretty easy. So it's 6 easy steps. It's really 3 easy steps to get that wake amp paired to your Alexa device. Now, I did mention multi-zone pairing, and this is what everyone's been asking about. Can I use this in multi-zone configuration? Right now, we do not have native multi-zone functionality, but Amazon Alexa does. So if I have multiple Alexa devices, I can group them. I can use them as multi-room or multi-zone configurations. The beautiful part of that for us is that if you have multiple wake amps paired to these Alexa devices, they obviously operate as a multi-room system as well. So in order to have a multi-zone setup, you need to have an Alexa Dot, a wake amp, and speakers all in the same room. And you just multiply that by however many zones you want to do. So you can see we have a 4-zone system here. It's 4 wake amps, 4 Amazon Alexa devices, and 4 pairs of speakers coming off of the wake amp. A little bit different illustration, but really saying the same thing here. An Alexa Dot paired via Bluetooth to a wake amp in each zone. Now, in order to do that, we're going to go back into our Alexa app. And once you have all of these connected via Bluetooth, and once you have all of the Alexa devices configured in your Alexa app, You just go back into the Alexa app, hit that devices tab, go to the plus sign in the top right. There's going to be a few options here. And this might be a little confusing at first because you can add group or combine speakers. Add device is what you would hit if you were just adding an Alexa to the system and you wanted to configure it over Wi-Fi, but you're going to hit combine speakers. Add group is really for lighting devices, pairing with speakers. It's not just for purely audio. The combined speakers is really what you would do to work with just an audio zone or configure an audio zone. Now, there's a couple options after that. There's home theater, which is if you want to pair up speakers and subwoofers in a 5.1 system or an immersive media experience, as they call it. But you want to select multi-room music, which obviously is another term for multi-zone. So hit that multi-room music icon. It's going to bring up a list of all of the Amazon Echo devices you have in the home. You want to obviously group them in, I should say, reasonable groups. And we'll talk about what that means on the next slide, but essentially just select all of the speakers that you want to use in that group. So let's say I just wanted Gabriel's Echo Dot, Gabriel's Echo Flex, and then the Hello Tech Echo. I would select those top three. But as you can see, we've selected all of the speakers. So we can say, hey, everywhere. This is my everywhere zone, or all of the speakers in the house. Hit save. Now, if you say, Alexa, play music everywhere, it will play whatever music you want it to play on all of the Alexa devices throughout the home. And I'll go back here. So if I say, hey, Alexa, play the Beatles everywhere, it's going to play the Beatles in each of these zones, because on this page, I selected all 4 of my speakers. Make sense? Now, if I want to do just a downstairs or an upstairs zone, or just in the, I don't know, play music in the kitchen and dining room, I can create different zones by grouping these different individual Echo devices together. Now, again, if I say play music everywhere, it will play music wherever you have named those zones. So again, I use the examples of upstairs and first floor. Like in my home, we have Alexa, play music outside, and that's a backyard system, and then a front porch system as well. So those are paired as a zone. Now, to do all this configuration, we've been working in the Alexa app, and it's important to distinguish the Alexa app from the Wake Amp app. The Wake Amp, and this is a tongue twister, I always get this garbled up, so I apologize, but the Wake Amp app allows you to configure the user experience and the audio on the Wake Amp itself. You can do this with multiples. You have to do them individually, but when you open the Wake Amp, it will bring up the list of all of the Wake Amps in the house, as long as they are within a reasonable range. So this allows you to do Bluetooth pairing, LED behavior and brightness, keypad behavior, tone control. We'll talk about all this stuff. So the first thing I want to talk about, and I want to talk about this because there is some confusion around exactly what it does. If you remember at the top of the hour, I talked about the keypad buttons, and depending on how you configure the Wake Amp, the keypad buttons do different things. This keypad volume settings, that is where you do that configuration. So if you want the keypad to control the volume, you select that. In that scenario, the keypad will control the volume of the music. When you're doing that, the source volume can remain fixed. So what I will usually do in that scenario is set the source volume to about 80% or 90%. Just use the front keypad buttons to control volume. Easy. So in that scenario, it's very easy to walk into a room, turn the music down, mute the music with the play pause button, or turn the music up. What I do not get in that scenario is the ability to say, Alexa, turn the volume down. Because the source volume in that scenario is really supposed to remain fixed. And if I tell Alexa to turn the volume down, you can get confused as a user about, why is this volume, why is my volume down when I have the wake amp turned all the way up? This is only an issue with voice devices. If you're using it on a phone, it's a two-way Bluetooth communication, so the volume will actually track. So if I turn the volume up on the wake amp, the volume will turn up on my iPhone. If I turn the volume up on my iPhone, the volume will go up on my wake amp. For some reason, Amazon and Google as well have decided they don't want to have volume syncing with their Bluetooth devices. So unfortunately, these are the options we're left with, but that's why we give you the option to do one or the other. If I select keypad controls music, the source controls the volume, meaning I can say, hey, Alexa, play the Beatles at volume 8. And the source will control the volume, whether that's the Alexa Dot, Alexa Show, whatever that device is, that will be the volume control. The front keypads or the keypad buttons will then control the music playback. So I can push forward or back or play pause on the wake amp faceplate and actually control that music. So that's pretty convenient. At the same time, I can still say, hey, Alexa, track forward or track back, and it will do those commands. This does not block out the ability for the source to do that as well. But when you do source controls volume, or I should say keypad controls music, you really want to set this amp fixed volume to a reasonable setting. Because keep in mind, you're controlling the volume from the source. So when we talk about proper gain staging, you want to have the amp volume up as high as it can without clipping. And it sort of depends on what the source is and what the music is. So essentially, as high as possible, set your amp fixed volume until you hear clipping and then roll it back a click or two. I have not had an issue with clipping, so I just have mine at 100%. I'm playing rock and roll, I'm playing all kinds of stuff through my wake amp, and it sounds great at full blast. So I guess it really depends on the source and really depends on the device. So you can also control LED settings, and that's the menu above the keypad volume settings. This toggle button will turn the LEDs off after 10 seconds of inactivity. Really easy. You can actually control the LED brightness as well. So when the LEDs are on, if I need to see them from across the room, I can turn the brightness all the way up. If the room is pretty dark and I use it to watch movies, I can turn it to a very low brightness. So even when I'm interacting with the wake amp, if the LEDs come on, if I turn the volume up, they're not very bright. I can see them when I'm sitting in front of it or standing in front of it, but I don't really need to see them from across the room. And then after 10 seconds, if I have this toggle on, they'll turn back off. There's, of course, this menu of all the different things that it will do or all the different errors that it will tell you. So hence the reason for 5 LEDs instead of just 1, because we've got a few different things that it needs to communicate depending on what it's seeing and what it's not seeing. There's also an EQ tab. If you go to the bottom of the app here, you'll see EQ tab. That opens up this window. Essentially treble and bass settings with loudness boost. Now, loudness is essentially a dynamic compressor that allows for full frequency response, we'll say, at any volume. So it gives you a little bit more bass when the volume is a little bit lower, a little bit less bass when the volume is higher. It gives you a nice, pleasant listening experience at any volume, or the listening experience that you would expect at any volume. And then, of course, plus 6 dB or minus 6 dB of treble and bass as well. Now, there's also a window for speaker size, and this is really tuned for architectural speakers. So there's a 4, a 6.5, and an 8-inch selection here. If you're using large bookshelf speakers or floor standing speakers, just set this to 8 inches, or I should say, regardless of what that woofer sizes. And I say that because this is essentially a small, medium, large setting. We're not saying, oh, you have a 5 1/4 inch woofer, so this isn't going to work for you, because it's not one of the options here. It's essentially small, medium, large. So just pick what suits the speaker you're using best. And of course, if you're using a dual 4-inch floor stander, we'd still consider that a large speaker, since it is a floor stander. So go ahead and select whatever is closest. But if you're using in-wall or in-ceiling speakers, this is really tuned to be as close to those woofer sizes as possible. And it will adjust the EQ and output limiter settings of the wake amp for those sizes. Now, this does do over-the-air firmware updates. The device that you're using, the iPhone or Android device, has to be connected to the internet, obviously. But if you hit firmware, it will search for a firmware update. This is a process you guys are used to. And then if it finds one, we'll say, great. Do you want to download it? Hit yes. It can take a few minutes depending on how big that update is. So please be patient with us. Obviously, this is all being transmitted over Bluetooth, so data is a little bit smaller than a traditional Wi-Fi connection. So it can take a few minutes, but luckily, we're not pushing a lot of firmware updates on this. We're still in the mass production firmware. We should have a firmware update in the next probably 60 to 90 days that will improve a lot of the functionality. We're hoping to have that multi-room functionality shortly thereafter as well. So keep an eye out for that. Now, I did mention what's included. Here's everything that the wake amp or that comes with the wake amp in the box: that power supply dongle that I mentioned that you actually connect the speaker wire to, and then it's just a barrel connector that plugs into the side of the power brick, and then all the mounting screws, faceplate screws, everything you need to make this thing, to get this thing up and running, I should say. Now, this does pair perfectly with episode core speakers. When we say it pairs perfectly with episode core speakers, it's really tuned for the frequency response of really any episode architectural speaker. But with the core speakers, we're generally talking about similar budget ranges for the client. So again, keep in mind, this is a retrofit, very budget-friendly opportunity for someone that has a multi-room audio system in their home that they're not using because they don't have electronics or a source to power it. So if you're pushing the wake amp and they need new speakers or don't have speakers, keep in mind the episode core speakers kind of fall within that same budget range for that same type of client. General specs on this guy: power output is 25 watts a channel. It actually does on paper seem like a low power rating, but again, I've got these things cranked in my house. They sound great. I've got them in 12-foot ceilings, and audio output is not an issue. I promise you that. So full frequency response, Bluetooth class 1 with BLE for the app control. This is Bluetooth version 5.0 as well, hence the multi-room connectivity that is hopefully coming in the next several months. So all the information you need on the general specs. Now let's get to the good stuff. Questions, go ahead and I will say either type them in the chat, or I don't know if you can raise your hand and we can unmute you.
They can, and we're getting some Q&A back.
Cool.
Hey, I've got audio. It worked.
Cool.
Michael, thank
nice.
you. That was
Welcome back,
was awesome.
Okay.
I'm so curious. You've been working with this. You've been championing this product. How has it been? Utilizing it for your own purposes. Did you find yourself really having to kind of go back into the Alexa control world, though, to really mitigate the stuff that you're talking about? Like our partners might have to do that as well. Hey, let's take over that Alexa first. Let's zero everything out. Let's normalize everything, and then dive into the wake stuff.
Honestly, no. And I had Alexa devices that were already grouped, and I was able to just keep those groups, and I was able to just go in and pair the wake amp to each of those devices individually. So it was essentially setting up a Bluetooth connection between each Alexa and each wake amp. The zones I had already set up remain the same. I was just able to then tie those zones into the in-ceiling speakers.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I've got a Control4 system in my house, but I'm not using this with that. Obviously, it's not Wi-Fi connectable, so you can't use it, but it's for a different customer. And so I found this to be really a much, or I should say, as simple a solution as using Alexa with my Control4 system, and in a lot of ways easier.
That's good to know. You got to have that confidence going in that, nothing's going to go, crazy. And, we might not have that access when we're walking in somewhere, but we have the confidence in the wake portion of it, right?
Right.
Okay, let's get to a question with Aaron. Aaron, thank you very much. No problem, man. We'll get to this. You've got a large room, and how can I connect 4 or more speakers with a unique wake amp? Should he configure a parallel or series connection?
Yeah, so connect the 4 speakers 2 at a time in parallel to each channel. So depending on the ohm rating of the speakers or the impedance of the speakers, you should do probably minimum 6 ohm speakers, but we recommend 8 ohm. Connect them in parallel, and you'll have a 4 ohm load on each channel, which is just fine for the wake amp. It's stable down to about 3.1 or 3.2 ohms, but we recommend really 8 ohm minimum for multiple speakers. Good question.
Got it. And then our friend Emily is just reiterating how awesome this product is. I think right there.
Nice.
Thank you.
Thanks, Emily.
Yeah, no, the buzz about this is great, Michael. And I'm coming from the West Coast in stores a lot, and so we're really anticipating some good stuff with this. So thank you. And like I said earlier, you've been championing it. I knew that behind the scenes you're probably working this stuff out, and just judging from your presentation, how you laid that out, very articulated. I love it. I think that guys are going to go back to some of those portions, some of those graphics, which we recorded this, guys. So keep that in mind. I'm going to send everybody this stuff on Friday morning, but if you need specific portions of this, myself and our sales team, as far as the locals are concerned, will help you out and kind of dive into exactly where you need to go to get some of these answers. Hardik, is there any input option using RCA or stereo pin?
Yeah, good question. There is not, and there's a reason for that, Hardik, and it's a good question. When we developed this product, it was really meant to be a retrofit solution, meaning this is a fast and easy replacement for those analog volume controls. Obviously, when you're in an analog volume control, you have the speaker wire that comes in from your source, but we needed to use that to power the wake amp. So it seemed counterintuitive to have to run another source wire through the wall to connect to this thing. So we wanted it to be a purely wireless connection. One, it makes for a lot easier use case for the end user, because one connection, you're not trying to figure out what input you're supposed to be on. You know that it's a rock solid wireless connection all the time. And two, we didn't really want to add confusion to the install process. We wanted this to be a really laser targeted to that Amazon Alexa or voice assistant use case, hence the Bluetooth connection only. Yeah, good question.
Yeah, makes sense. That's what they're walking into for a majority of the time. Let me ask you, Mike, using your audiophile hat, have you kind of tricked the system in a sense where you're taking, let's say, a larger space and utilizing the zone capabilities and kind of stereoing out balances and so forth, widening the sound field? Do you know what I mean?
Man, that's a good question. I have not tried to do that, or really tried to tweak it. And part of the reason is that the in-ceiling speakers in my house were already installed, right? So it wasn't, I couldn't really mess with placement and then mess with sort of tweaking the settings on the wake amp.
Yeah, I guess it would be zone. I guess it would be zone volumes. You know what I mean? Like walking into a large entryway and feeling the, kind of manipulating the back end of that to create kind of a different balance.
Yeah, so for instance, I'm sitting in my kitchen and you guys can probably hear it's pretty echoey because it's an open space, right? So I have our kitchen leads into our family room, and our family room is sort of a vaulted ceiling. So, and then the front door is just off the family room. So you kind of walk in, and yes, because of the different ceiling heights, I've had to manipulate the volume and in a lot of ways the EQ because of the different spaces that you're in to make it sound like it's a singular zone on the first floor. So yeah, that's to your point. Yes, it's very possible. You're probably going to have to do it to make it sound like one zone. But yeah, I think honestly, if you're tuning one room to sound good, and then you tune the next room to sound good, if you zone them together, they're going to sound good together generally.
Yeah.
You know, there might be a little volume tweaking here and there, but I didn't have too much trouble getting them to combine pleasantly as a single zone.
And did you find, I think you had set a lot of the Alexa stuff at 80%. You said that as just a general rule, you know, but that worked for you, or you want that power going in and then able to manipulate from there?
So I'm able to set it to 100% because I'm using Spotify as my source. So when I talk to Alexa, and I'm assuming this is the case, but when I talk to Alexa, I say, you know, Alexa, play the Beatles or play the Rolling Stones. And I have Spotify set as my default music service. Because of the output level of Spotify specifically, I think it's not as hot as like if I had a music server and I had, you know, CDs burned into the music server or WAV files in that music server that I was telling Alexa to pull from. I think because the Spotify output level is a little bit lower, you can crank that up. So, and you don't get clipping, or I don't get clipping. And I'm even like listening to modern music like hip hop and some EDM stuff at home. I still don't get clipping. So I think we say, you know, roll it back if you're hearing clipping, but I haven't really had that issue.
Yeah, no, it's personally good. It's good to hear that confidence, because I think inherently we're all used to not going to 100% just in fear of picking up dirt, you know, and you don't know where to source that at. But it's good to know that, you know, because ultimately we want the, you know, the amplification part of this to really push. That's, again, it's one of those false things where we're thinking, hey, I really want those speakers to be driving, you know, just shy of getting dirty, and let's try to maximize this the whole way through.
Right. Exactly right. Yeah, it's a great sounding piece, and it's a system where you can just slide all the faders to the right or all the way up, and it still sounds pretty good. Yeah.
Hardik, yeah, another question. Are you seeing a version of this product to replace an A-bus system in the future? Like we have a lot of the builder homes where they have Cat5 ran from the head and to the volume control, and speaker wired to speakers ran to the same volume control location.
Yeah, so that's a really good question, Hardik. Two things I'll say there. One, the idea of a PoE powered wake amp has been very appealing to me since I started at Snap. And full disclosure, this thing was sort of in development when I started, and pretty close to being kicked off when I started. And you know, between all of us, when I first saw this thing, I thought, I don't really understand the appeal of this. I don't really understand why we need to do this when we sell Control 4 systems. And it wasn't until I got this thing and started to play with it that I thought, this thing's really powerful. This thing can open up doors to new partners, integration partners, and open up new doors for clients, you know, clients that have these systems in their homes. But when I came in, I kind of saw it as, after I started to play with it, this is great. If we had a PoE version, there's so much more we could do with it. So keep an eye out for that as we move into, you know, what's next for the wake amp, and what is the wake amp ecosystem. You know, what else can we do to enhance the user experience with this type of product, I'll say, without giving too much away. The second part is, if you have cat cable run to a location, we actually have this in testing right now, but instead of using 16.2 to go to that power supply, you can twist Cat5 pairs together and use that as DC power cable. And that's actually spec'd in Cat5. I think it can power up to like 50 volts or something, well within the specs of what this DC power supply puts out that's included with the wake amp. So we actually don't have it included in the manual right now. We don't have it's published, I should say, because we're still testing and confirming, but there's really no reason that I can see and that our testing engineers can see that would keep you from being able to use Cat5 as your power cable. So if you have an old A-bus system, snip off the ends, use the DC power supply and the wake amp to connect, or use the cable to connect those together. You should be good to go.
Nice. I like your comment about you know, when you got into the development of this, and then you saw how open it was, or the expandability to the different partners, which is exactly what a lot of us at Local are going through. I think this is a perfectly focused line, if you will, that what these guys are walking into. Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
So the homeowner now and our partner, they're having a great time and they want more, right? And how easy is this to kind of shut down and graduate to something else? You know, what would they, you know what I mean? Like, because we've got offerings, like you said, you know, why wouldn't they just go here? And this is perfectly placed right up to there. Is there other options for this system to be used in a graduating system?
Yeah, so keep in mind, this is simple speaker wire, right? So if I have speaker wire going from the power supply in the AV rack or the AV closet to the wake amp, and then speaker wire from the wake amp to the speakers, if I want to pull that wake amp out at any point, just splice that connection, and you've got a home run from the speakers to the AV rack. So again, sort of, you know, I don't want to give too much away about what's next for wake amp, but keep in mind that this opens up doors for partners that might go in and be doing security. They might be going in and doing networking stuff, or, you know, hanging TVs, and they might see an analog volume control on the wall and say, hey, I see you've got in-ceiling speakers. Are you using them? And 99% of homeowners that have in-ceiling speakers that are connected to an analog volume control probably have no idea what they do. They have no idea how to work them, and they don't even know where to start connecting them. So instead of going into a home and saying, hey, you have these speakers that you probably noticed, but you don't know how they are used, let me sell you 20 grand worth of electronics to get them started. That's a different conversation with a homeowner than a wake amp scenario, where you can say, do you have an Alexa device? Do you have $425 that you would spend to get your in-ceiling speakers to work with your Alexa device? If so, I can have it set up, installed within an hour. Let's start there. And then if you find that you enjoy having those in-ceiling speakers, then I'll give you a call in 6 months and we can figure out what's next. And maybe that's another zone of wake amp. Maybe it's an elevated system. But the wake amp is a much easier starting point than going in and saying, you know, let me bring in a rack of episode response amps and tie it into a triad matrix, or, you know, a C4 system. I mean, heaven forbid you go into someone's house to wire up a security system, and then you try to sell them on a $30,000 Control4 system. Like, that's a very different conversation than, again, a $425 wake amp.
Awesome. I love how you guys have thought about that and really where its placement, but you had some great scripting there. So I hope everybody listening to that enjoyed Michael's discussion with his pseudo end user right there. Hardik was reiterating if the amps will be, the wake amps now will be compatible in some way with a future PoE model or something in that form. You
know, Hardik, we're not far down the road on that development. It's just sort of what in product development, what we call fuzzy front end. You know, how do we bring the next generation of this? And a lot of that discussion is, how do we make backwards compatibility between the two generations. And I think that will be something that's really important, especially if you bring in, 4 or 5 of these things in a home at $425 a piece end user cost. It's not always an easy conversation to say, well, you need to swap all that stuff out that I sold you 2 years ago and upgrade. Sometimes it is an easy conversation. But a lot of times it's easier just to say, hey, we've got this new technology. It will work with everything you've already got installed, but let's tack on this, this, and this in terms of feature set and cost. Now, you did mention compatibility with Control 4. Right now, we are purely focused on these sort of entry level, I should say, multi-zone or entry budget multi-zone customers. And so compatibility with Control 4 is a very low priority for us right now, because we have better solutions on the Control 4 side if you want multi-zone compatibility or compatibility with Alexa or a voice assistant. That's not to say this could bridge the gap at some point, but right now we're sort of keeping those clients separate. But that's a good question. And we get asked about compatibility with Control 4 a lot, and it's really just, there's such a split in these two markets right now that we're not even thinking about bridging them with this product yet. So good question.
Yeah, I agree. There's so much going on from the store level or the local level anyway, and so many choices, but not that we're afraid of linking those choices by any means.
Right.
There's still so much out there. So Michael, hey, shameless plug. I'm going to be putting together not only a roundtable outdoor discussion coming up here on my weekly webinar series, but you said you kind of played around with it. How was your thoughts and development on the outside control with the Wake amp?
Yeah, it's great. Obviously, the Wake amp is not weatherproof. Don't put it outside, but I've got it actually just installed on the inside, essentially the interior side of an exterior wall.
Exactly.
And my under-eave speakers are wired up to that. So I can, if I'm outside with my phone, I can control the Alexa app on my phone, or control the music and send to that Wake amp on my phone via Bluetooth, or, again, just say, hey, Alexa, play music outside if I'm near one of my Alexa devices in the house, and it will do that.
With a Sunbright control as well?
What do you mean with a Sunbright control?
I don't know,
like
because we're gonna throw you a TV to start playing with too, and seeing how much you can really push this thing for an outdoor experience.
Well, I've got a TV outside. I've got it wired up to my under-eave speakers. I have not tried to sort of cross the paths there, but it's an interesting perspective. I don't know. I'll have to talk to Rob Brunette about possibilities there.
Well, we got to get you a demo package. That's just what's got to happen.
Well,
here.
True. Yeah. I'll bring that up to him.
We'll be discussing some outdoor stuff coming up, not only on my weekly webinar series, but really, again, just following that same line of thinking. Just what can we do? You're going to walk into these scenarios, and that is a very a decent request from an end user. Like, hey, I want you to put A, B, and C together, and how can we control this? But with our price point, the way we're looking at, and the power and control, the app looked great, very simple. I loved it. So cool.
Yeah. So last question from Hardik. How far can the Alexa device be from the Wake amp for it to keep a secure connection? Most Alexa devices are right now just using residential Bluetooth. So we say that's, or Bluetooth says that that's a 30-foot or 10-meter minimum. We essentially say if the Alexa device is in the same room as the Wake amp, that makes for the best user experience and best connectivity. So the largest room I've got is actually that living room. It's about 25 feet long, and I've got the Wake amp sort of by the front door and the Alexa device pretty much across the room from it. So I'd say 20 or 25 feet, and I've had no connection issues.
Nice.
So good question.
Well, great presentation, guys. We're about 10 minutes shy of the top of the hour. Great job. You know what? We're going to do this in 2 more hours. Michael, are you busy in 2 hours?
Yeah.
You are? No, you're not.
I am.
Yeah.
I am with this.
Yeah. Then in 2 hours, Michael and I are going to start this thing all over again. I'm not going to have any more audio issues. And yeah, Michael, you and I, let's get together about 15 minutes beforehand, maybe do a little pregame,
Cool.
maybe some more questions that might come my way, as they usually do between this little pause of time, because we're not going to get any work done in the next 2 hours anyway. We're just going to kind of prep for the show. But awesome job there, guys. Remember, anybody who registered for this morning's class is going to get that email from me, and that's going to include the video that Michael recorded for us. Thank you very much, Michael. His slide deck. We're going to put together some links and so forth. But you know, we've been really increasing our social media topics, like leading up to this webinar, in fact. So if you do get something in response to the Wake Amp on your phone or something like that from social media, hit us back. I see all of that, so we can continue the conversation. If you're headed to a job site and so forth, that's what this is all about. And we usually see communication, Michael, you know, like over the next week or so on this topic. So just want everybody to know that Michael and I will both be standing by. Hit me with the emails as usual, based off of the email that I send to you guys. So it's just that line of communication over the next few days. We realize that we kind of just move so fast. Next will be another topic, but for this launch, for this particular release, you know who the players are in support and so forth. So yeah, from all of the local locations, MRI and Custom Plus and AllNet, and of course Volutone out here, we're ready to receive. We're ready to do this. We're really ready to help you guys and expand on this product. I'm really looking forward to it, Mike.
Yeah. Thank you guys for your participation. Thank you guys for your interest. We're really excited about this product, and we hope you will be too.
All right, Snap One Local. We talked about a number of different events too, Michael. I hope I get you back out on the road. That's where you and I met. I mean, I think we were touring around, and no, it's definitely opened back up. I've got a number of events. We've got grand openings across the country that I'd love you guys to participate in. Those schedules are all on our websites. If you're an MRI partner, just go to the events section there. But I'm trying to kind of encapsulate all of the different events that we've got going on. I've got security, a third-party product like 2GIG. I've got a tour going through the country right now, 18 stops. And then, like I said, I'm developing a 30-stop full outdoor experience with a headliner, if you will, with Effects Luminaire. And then I'm going to have the Control 4 guys actually present every day on how to use the various outdoor products in a very user-friendly sit-down training. So look for that. That's going to run us from May through June. So a lot going on behind the scenes, a lot of locations that, Michael, you can go ahead and stop in on and make a guest appearance and help me train up everybody, right?
All right, I'm going to keep an eye out for that email, and I'll meet up with you.
All right, guys, we'll see you guys in a couple of hours. Thanks again, as always, for joining us on the weekly webinar series. We will see you next week with that outdoor discussion with the all-star panel. I'm Gary Usher from Volutone in this instance, from all the Snap One locals. Thank you, guys. Be safe. Michael, catch you in a few hours. Thanks, man.
Thanks, Gary. Talk to you soon.